Do you even realize that we, the people in Gorgon, we're all human beings? We matter too, you know. Jaehwan stood there, silent, taking in her words, but it was clear Miho's frustration had only just begun. Even though they might not possess his strength or endurance, Mino reminded Jaehwan that they were human too. Her words triggered memories within him. He recalled how she had once refused to retreat, even if it meant dying at the hands of gangsters. Then, images of Michael working tirelessly flashed in his mind. Particles began to shimmer faintly around Miho, and above her head, a warning formed, "Don't get any funny ideas." His skill, suspicion, kicked in, revealing not only Mino's surface thoughts but also those of a man hiding nearby, watching them closely. The man's thoughts were clear. He threatened not to break his promise to her, warning that if Mino forgot to bring him, the elderly woman is going to pay for it. Jaehwan realized that Mino was being used. The hidden figure had instructed her to say whatever was necessary to lure him to a specific location, where they held a hostage. The protagonist's eyes narrowed as he spotted the man lurking in the shadows across the street, recognizing him from a previous encounter. For a moment, Jaehwan considered whether to intervene and rescue the hostage. But he quickly dismissed the idea. In his mind, it wouldn't make a difference. Saving one person in a world like this would change nothing. His suspicion skill had long ago shown him the harsh truth. This was a world where numbers and data dictated everything, where people sold their souls for the sake of a higher score. The humans around him were content just to survive, with no grand ambitions or ideals. He turned away, intent on continuing his search for the dream demon. But before he could leave, Mino's hand shot out and grabbed his collar. Her voice was sharp as she said, "This is why I don't consider you human." Mino's words stung, but she pressed on, clarifying that she couldn't continue traveling with someone like him, someone with such a cold, singular goal. Jaehwan was taken aback. Her words carried a finality he hadn't expected. Miho was resolute, hoping they would never cross paths again. The protagonist stood there, shocked. For the first time, Mino seemed truly human in his eyes, a strange realization that left him momentarily speechless. In the background, he could hear the man cursing her betrayal, ordering someone to send a carrier falcon. The situation was rapidly unraveling, but Jaehwan's thoughts were elsewhere, lingering on the humanity he hadn't seen before. The man's anger flared as he cursed, realizing that they had brought the dream demon there for no reason. Jaehwan, surprised, had no idea that the dream demon had been involved with them all along. However, before dealing with anything, he decided it was best to change his clothes first. Meanwhile, Mino found herself walking into a bar, almost involuntarily, unsure of how she ended up there. As she opened the door, she muttered an apology for being late, only to be greeted by utter chaos. The place was completely wrecked. She expected as much and noticed a man already waiting for her. Behind him, another figure held the bar owner hostage, nonchalantly eating an apple. Claire, the bar owner, looked terrified, clearly thinking she was about to meet her end because of Mino. The man holding her roughly told her to keep quiet. Janaya, the elder of the Golden Sky clan and the eldest of the three Janaya brothers, sneered as he addressed Mino. "So, the infamous Witch of Destruction has come alone. What happened to our deal?" Mino slowly unsheathed her knives, a sarcastic smile playing on her lips. "You're more gullible than you look, Janaya," she said. "Tell me, have you ever met a witch who kept her promises?" Her tone dripped with mockery as she informed him that Jaehwan wasn't coming to the bar. "You want to know why?" she continued. "Because he's got bigger plans that include tearing this world apart." Janaya's fury flared as she flung her blades toward him. He couldn't believe her audacity, and his eyes darkened with rage. "You've gone mad," he growled, summoning shadows that rushed forward, hidden in the dim light, aiming to strike her down. "People call you the Witch of Destruction because of your power to summon horned beasts," Janaya taunted. "Let's see if those rumors are true." The shadows charged, swift and lethal, but Mino deftly somersaulted out of their path, hurling a blade into one of them. The shadow dissolved on impact. Furious, Janaya drew his sword and swung it in a wide arc, sending sharp, cutting waves of energy toward her. Mino couldn't avoid them all, and one of the slashes grazed her, leaving a trail of blood. One of Janaya's men sneered from the sidelines, watching her bleed. "She looks more like a showgirl than the so-called Witch of Destruction." Ignoring the taunt, Mino stood her ground, her eyes locked on Janaya. Mino cursed under her breath, regretting the fight setting inside the bar. Outside, she might have had a chance to turn things around. Janaya, smug, reassured her that the bar's walls were soundproof, making sure no one would hear her cries for help. He demanded that she stop resisting and bring Jaehwan to them before it was too late. Frustrated, Mino spat curses at them, warning they would soon face the fury of the Black Forest clan. But Janaya's men weren't swayed. One pressed a blade to Claire's throat and called her bluff, saying they knew there was no Black Forest branch in Gorgon. By the time anyone from the clan figured out what had happened to the so-called Witch of Destruction and the old woman they held hostage, both would be long dead. In retaliation, Mino unleashed the Seven Swords technique of Acheron, summoning a flurry of icy blades. However, with a single effortless swing, Janaya shattered the attack, mocking her with a cruel smile, calling it a cute little trick. He taunted her, relishing the idea of tearing her apart himself. Mino, now on her knees and bleeding from the earlier strike, cursed them once more, feeling a wave of dizziness wash over her. At that moment, a forgotten memory surfaced. Jaewon had once asked if it were possible to turn back time. She wished she could. If only she had gone with him, maybe she would have witnessed the world's end by his side. Just as Janaya prepared to strike her down, a bright light suddenly shot out from behind him, colliding with his sword. Everyone in the room froze in disbelief as Jaewon walked in. Mino couldn't help but smirk, though this wasn't the dramatic rescue she had imagined. With a sly grin, she teased him, asking if he had come to save her or if something had happened to his end-of-the-world mission. Without missing a beat, Jaewon handed her a package. "The clothes you got me didn't fit," he said flatly. Mino blinked in astonishment, wondering if this was truly the reason he had returned, not to save her, but to complain about his clothes. The man eyed Jaewon, his gaze narrowing as he asked if he was the one carrying the stones of fallen souls. His comrade laughed mockingly, commenting that Jaewon had saved them the trouble of hunting him down and joked about it being some sort of twisted delivery service. Ignoring their sneers, Jaewon calmly inquired if they had the dream demon with them. His question caught them off guard, their smug expressions vanishing. Correcting himself, Jaewon demanded that they bring the dream demon to him. The men exchanged bewildered glances, unsure if they had heard him correctly. Had Jaewon completely lost his mind? One of them scoffed, asking if he seriously intended to challenge an entire fortress on his own. He had to be joking. Mino, standing beside him, warned Jaewon to be cautious, informing him that their opponent was a fourth-stage adapted player. Players who had reached the fourth stage were considered advanced, and she advised him to be meticulous in his approach. Jaewon, however, was unconcerned, asking her with a teasing grin if she was afraid he might lose. Mino shook her head and, after considering it, admitted that she didn't think he would lose to them at all. The members of the Golden Sky clan, growing impatient and irritated by Jaewon's arrogance, charged at him in unison, cursing him as they attacked. Jaewon's eyes glimmered with anticipation as he raised his spirit sword, channeling an overwhelming surge of energy into its blade. Janaya barely dodged the first strike, his heart racing in disbelief at the power behind it. He couldn't believe Jaewon had such strength. Wasn't this guy supposed to be an unadapted player? Jaewon himself was surprised that Janaya managed to evade his attack. The only creature that had ever avoided his shallow stab before had been a five-horned beast. Could this fourth-stage adapted player really be on the same level as those fearsome beasts? He pondered for a moment, remembering that the beast hadn't dodged the strike, it had survived it. So, despite the dodging skills of his opponents, the beast had still been stronger. But that detail didn't faze him. Mino gasped as she saw Claire being taken hostage, her eyes widening with panic. She shouted Claire's name in fear, realizing the situation was growing more dangerous by the second. Janaya glared at Jaewon and threatened him, warning that if he tried anything like that again, the old lady would be dead. Claire, defiant despite her situation, urged Jaewon to attack, asking what he was waiting for. Her boldness earned her a swift punch from them, who barked at her to shut up, adding that the next hit would be much worse if she didn't comply. Mino, standing nearby, pleaded with Claire to hold on just a little longer, promising they'd save her. Turning to Jaewon, she asked if they were capable of handling the situation. He glanced at her, puzzled, and coldly responded that he was only there for the dream demon. Whether it was a hostage or an enemy in his way, he would brush them aside without a second thought. Suddenly, Mino grabbed onto Jaewon's cloak, her voice trembling as she said, "She's human." Startled by her words, Jaewon activated his suspicion skill. He could hear an ominous throbbing sound. As he looked at the figures before him, their human forms started to waver, like a glitch in reality. His gaze shifted to Claire, who appeared like a fragile skeleton, her voice trembling as she called out for help. Jaewon cursed under his breath and raised his sword. With a powerful thrust, he unleashed a devastating energy that split the roof of the bar wide open. The force was so immense that the energy beam reached skyward, causing the entire bar to crumble as furniture and debris began to fall apart. Outside, Inspector Carlton and his soldiers spotted the beam of light shooting into the sky. Carlton's curiosity was piqued, and he ordered his men to continue moving toward the source of the disturbance. They responded affirmatively and marched on. Meanwhile, inside the now-destroyed bar, the magical barrier around it shattered. One of Janaya's men rushed to inform him of the problem. The soundproof walls had been destroyed. Hearing this, Janaya clenched his teeth in frustration. As Carlton's voice echoed from outside, he ordered his soldiers to surround the area. Carlton himself shouted a question at Jaehwan, asking what was going on. With a sly grin, Jaehwan thanked the inspector for his impeccable timing, explaining that the people inside had broken the law. He pointed a finger at Janaya, mocking him, saying, "I'm no legal expert, but I'm pretty sure this is a violation of Article 276, Paragraph 4 of the Gorgon Criminal Code." Jaehwan addressed Inspector Carlton, informing him that the individuals inside were part of a conspiracy to use the pub as a base to destroy the world. Mino, standing nearby, was taken aback, especially since it was Jaehwan who had plans to bring about the world's end. Despite this, Carlton took Jaehwan's words seriously and confirmed that their actions violated Article 174, Paragraph 4, and Article 124, Paragraph 6 of the Gorgon Criminal Code. He charged them with the unlawful destruction of property within the city and the abduction of a resident, declaring they were now under arrest. One of Janaya's men, recognizing the situation, became anxious. Realizing their plan was falling apart, Janaya ordered a retreat. However, Carlton wasn't going to let them escape so easily. He activated his silver bond skill, binding them with shining chains as they cursed their misfortune. Summoning his trident, Carlton warned them that resisting was pointless, though Janaya, in his frustration, ignored the warning and rushed toward the inspector in an attempt to attack. Carlton blocked Janya's assault, and the two became locked in a tense standoff, their weapons clashing with increasing intensity. Trembling under the pressure, Janaya's sword began to crack from the force of Carlton's trident. Desperate, Janaya leapt into the air, intending to land a finishing blow while shouting curses at the inspector. But Carlton was quicker. He threw his silver chains, pulling Janaya down and pinning him to the ground. With his trident poised at Janaya's throat, Carlton demanded surrender. Realizing he had no choice, Janaya begrudgingly complied, muttering that Carlton's righteousness was almost as naive as it was annoying. However, Janya had one last trick up his sleeve. Just as he surrendered, a hidden device behind him began to release a noxious gas. Moments later, an explosion rocked the area, spreading thick, dark fumes throughout the pub. In the ensuing chaos, Janaya and his men made their escape. As the gas spread, Carlton's men frantically rushed outside, one of them coughing heavily after inhaling some of the dangerous black cloud. Janaya cursed his subordinate for not wearing his mask properly but reassured him that breathing in a small amount wouldn't be fatal. Meanwhile, Seol Lang Hyuk, the elder of the Golden Sky clan and an expert manipulator, observed the situation from afar. He was stunned that Janaya had deployed the black cloud without permission from the Ark, particularly since they had agreed to capture Mino, the Witch of Destruction, alive. Hyuk's frustration grew as he realized that, despite his intentions, Janaya had gone too far, and their mission had taken an unexpected and dangerous turn. Janaya explained to Seol Lang Hyuk that it wasn't the Witch of Destruction that caused their predicament but the fact that he had been bound by the silver bond. This revelation took Seol by surprise. The mention of the silver bond immediately made him suspect that the pesky inspector, Carlton, was involved. Janaya confirmed this, which brought a twisted smile to Seol's face. He found amusement in the idea that Carlton had breathed in the black cloud, thinking it served the inspector right. Seol mused that it must be quite the spectacle. However, his amusement quickly turned to shock when he saw Jaehwan emerging from the ruined pub, carrying Mino. Turning to Janaya in disbelief, he asked who this man was. But before Janaya could answer, Jaehwan drew his sword and, with a single swift motion, struck the tree where they had been hiding. Forced to leap down to avoid the blow, Janaya cursed under his breath, as he was just as clueless about the mysterious man as Seol was. He couldn't fathom how Jaehwan had survived the black cloud, a feat unheard of even among the elite warriors of Nak Myung. Jaehwan surveyed the group of people surrounding Janaya, his gaze cold and distant. He asked if they were part of Janaya's group but quickly dismissed them as bothersome. Without hesitation, he raised his sword and slammed it into the ground with such force that it cracked the earth beneath them. Though Jaehwan was reluctant to rely on external forces, he decided he had no other choice in the moment. Drawing on the power of Garnak, the ancient force manifested behind him, its terrifying presence sending waves of fear through the Golden Sky clan members. Panic spread like wildfire as the clan members scrambled to escape the impending doom. Garnak's roar sent massive energy slashes through the air, cutting down many of them instantly. Those who survived the initial strike were gravely injured, while the rest lay lifeless. As Jaehwan stepped forward, Seol Lang Hyuk, visibly shaken, watched in disbelief. He muttered under his breath, wondering if Jaehwan was some kind of monster. Deciding that he had no intention of facing such a force, Seol left the scene, abandoning Janaya to deal with the disaster he had created. Janaya cursed as he watched Seol flee, leaving him to face the aftermath alone. He glanced at the bodies of his men, Jan Mang and Jan Myung, both lying motionless on the ground, and clenched his teeth in frustration. Everything had unraveled so quickly. Before he could fully comprehend the extent of his defeat, Jaehwan approached him, his voice calm but menacing. Jaehwan told Janaya there was only one way for him to leave the place alive. Janaya, still in disbelief, stared at Jaehwan, struggling to understand how he had been brought to this point so effortlessly. Jaehwan's eyes narrowed as he demanded Janaya reveal the location of the dream demon. Janaya, visibly shaken, responded with a nervous laugh, saying that even if he told Jaehwan, it wouldn't matter. He explained that once he found out, I would wish I were dead regardless. Jaehwan studied him, his expression unreadable, as he silently questioned who or what this dream demon truly was. Meanwhile, Janaya's gaze shifted to his fallen comrade, whose body was fading away. Panic set in as he realized his situation was becoming dire. With his back against the wall, Janaya fumbled through his backpack. There was only one option left. His trembling hand retrieved a small, ominous stone, the Stone of Fallen Souls. As he prepared to consume it, Jaehwan's eyes widened in shock, recognizing the artifact from past encounters. He recalled the time he had witnessed people consuming these stones and had dismissed it as nothing more than a drug-induced frenzy. Mino once explained him that while it might seem like addiction, the stones were not drugs. Instead, they were used to reduce spiritual contamination, a last resort for those desperate to avoid the curse of becoming undead. As Janaya swallowed the stone, his body began to contort and distort. He screamed in agony, veins bulging across his face, his body erupting with spikes as he transformed into a grotesque creature. Those who remained in the area gasped in horror, watching in fear as the now undead Janaya unleashed his fury, attacking innocent bystanders and draining the life from them. Chaos erupted as people fled, desperately trying to escape the monster. Jaehwan watched the carnage unfold, his mind racing as he contemplated the state of this twisted world. Janaya, his gaze drifted toward the sky, where a massive, unblinking eye stared down at him. In that moment, he questioned the meaning of honor and dignity in such a place. What had he been so afraid of before? He chuckled to himself, feeling an unsettling sense of freedom in the madness. Suddenly, Janaya, now fully transformed into the undead, spotted Jaehwan. Rage fueled his every move as he cursed the protagonist and extended his grotesquely elongated fingers, aiming to strike him down. But as Janya moved closer, something unexpected happened. He froze, his monstrous face contorted in disbelief. He couldn't understand how someone like Jaehwan, a human, could exist in a world so far gone. Jaehwan, unfazed by the attack, activated his suspicion ability. Yet, to his surprise, it revealed nothing. Even with his skill, he was unable to discern the true essence of the creature before him. This anomaly unsettled Jaehwan, and he prepared himself for whatever was to come, his thoughts racing as he faced this incomprehensible foe. Jaehwan glanced at his spirit sword, a flicker of memory surfacing in his mind. Without hesitation, he raised it toward the now transformed Janaya, muttering to himself that it didn't matter anymore. In that moment, Fihuan darted forward, sword raised, as a surge of immense energy gathered around the blade. With a swift, decisive strike, Jaehwan's blade sliced through the undead Janaya's neck, sending his head tumbling to the ground. Janaya's lifeless eyes widened in shock as his mind flashed back to fragments of his past. A light drizzle began to fall, adding to the somber atmosphere as Janaya's body slowly faded into nothingness. Jaehwan stood there, gazing at the remnants of the fight, pondering what that creature had truly been. Sheathing his sword, he turned his attention toward the pub, certain that one of the survivors might hold the key to the dream demon's whereabouts. Meanwhile, inside the pub, other inspectors had arrived on the scene. One of them barked orders for everyone to stay clear as they searched for their fallen comrades. Amidst the chaos, Mino slowly regained her senses and addressed Jaehwan, catching his attention. He was startled to see that her condition had worsened. Her veins were swelling ominously, a sure sign she was on the brink of transforming into an undead. One of the inspectors called out, discovering Carlton's unconscious form nearby. Carlton, barely conscious, commanded them to alert the castle immediately, sensing the gravity of the situation. As the urgency spread through the pub, Mino desperately clutched Jaehwan's cape, her voice trembling as she begged him to end her life before it was too late. Her body was rapidly deteriorating, her transformation seemingly inevitable. Jaehwan froze at her request, shocked by the realization that Mino was human after all. Yet, despite knowing this, his suspicion flickered and faded in her presence, leaving him unable to fully grasp the truth. He tightened his grip on his sword, conflicted but resolute. This journey, he reminded himself, had no room for sentimentality. If hesitation took root, everything he had fought for would be at risk. Whatever the cost, emotions had no place in his mission. His sword hovered over her as he prepared to make the hardest decision yet.